Alright, g'day, hi, and welcome. So hopefully, one, you can hear me. Hopefully the camera angle is not too bad. Hopefully my legs are not in the way. Okay, the question is, how do you become a millionaire playing guitar? First, you be a millionaire. Then you buy a guitar. Alright, okay, so this video is kind of like making money as a musician. And for some people, say, yeah, I'm just in it for the fun. And that should be the number one reason why you're a musician, is for the fun. But let's be real, it's nice if you can make money with musical instruments, right? Especially because we pay so much for them, and the return on investment can be kind of sketchy at best if you go with a monetary thing. But if you're buying musical instruments solely to make money, well, you've already got to be making money, kind of thing. So obviously the first one is paid gigs. I think after your first, second, maybe even 10th gig, we'll go up to, say, like 10 gigs. We'll call those practice runs. After that, unless it's a charity or something like that, you really shouldn't be playing for free. Jam nights don't really count because jam nights are not dedicated to you. You're just there. Dust on my drums. You're just there basically, having fun. But, if you're going to play an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, uh, you know, I get it. You can play free every night of the week if you wanted to. And that can be a lot of fun. And for some people, they might have jobs that, they're well paid anyway, so they just go play for fun. But the thing is if you want to play the really big stages and stuff like that, you got to kind of work your way there. Sometimes you get a lucky break, and really depends on how talented you are and stuff like that. But I talked about yesterday about you know doing covers and stuff like that, and how like sometimes it gets stagnant doing the same songs over and over again, especially when you overbook yourselves. When you play like 4 nights a week, you never have enough energy to plus with all the other stuff you have to do in a week, you usually don't have the energy or the time to learn new stuff, and then you get stagnant, and then people start quitting the band because they're sick of the songs that they're playing, right? So I talked about that in the last one, but the next one is, how do you go about getting paid? Well, I'll give you an idea. Let's look at how the music industry has went. So we'll go back just to the 1950s, where you start seeing, like, Elvis and people like that. And they would take a person like Elvis, for example, and they would elevate them, or the Beatles, and they would elevate them to a stardom never before seen in human history, right? They would just, these people would become like gods almost. And the thing about that is that worked for very few people. So if you think about how many bands there were in, say, the 1950s, 1960s that you knew about, versus how many bands there actually was, it's always overwhelmingly more musicians you don't know about than you do. And especially when such a small industry, when you really think about it, it looks like it's huge. The music industry, even still today, looks huge, but it's really not. Uh, because there's so many, about 2 billion people play musical instruments on this planet. The instrument, anything can qualify for an instrument here, so I'm saying this very loosely. But if you take, like, your, typical musicians, people in orchestras, people in rock bands and metal bands and blues bands and country bands, etc., etc., those type of musicians, there's still probably about 1 billion of those. So out of 1 billion people, the idea of rising to the top, say like a Taylor Swift or an Elvis Presley or a Michael Jackson or Megadeth or Iron Maiden or something like that, is almost a slim to none chance. Like, it's not an impossible, but it's a slim to none chance. So if you're focused on becoming the next big thing, you're probably going to be putting a lot of energy and effort into the wrong things. Whereas if you're thinking more of, okay, well, I'm going to do what I like to do the way I want to do it, and if it takes, great. If it doesn't, I still have fun anyway. I think that's a better take to go with, like, being doing the best, growing as a musician, all that stuff. A lot of musicians right now are one-man bands like myself. As you can see, finally got my drum kit about 3 weeks in on it. Am I a good drummer? Not really, not particularly, but really a month in on it. Not even a month in on it. I don't expect to be, but 6 months down the line, I'll probably be pretty decent. And as you hear me make newer songs, you're going to hear me progressively get better. And my bass is, having the bass for the last past year. I mean, that's done more for my bass playing than, the last 50 years of my life. You know what I mean? Um, so the thing is that because in this kind of antisocial world that we live in, unfortunately, like in the 80s and 90s and stuff like that, if you were in you know high school bands or rock band, like a rock band, metal band, didn't matter what it was a social event. Like nobody knew about you playing until you played in front of people, right? That was pretty much uh, the thing. Like nobody knew about you as a musician until you showed that you were a musician. Where nowadays people could across the world can find out you're a musician because of social media, which is has its obvious vices or vines there for sure. But it also has its vices too, because you're always stuck as a one man band, right? Which has its limitations as well, or one woman band, whatever. One people kind band, whatever. Um, but you get what I'm getting at. You do have more access and ability than ever before in human history to promote yourself and stuff like that than any other musician has ever had. However, it is a bit of a double-edged sword in the sense that if you're trying to make a living off of it, your competition is 2 billion people, potentially 8 billion people, but we'll say of the people that are accounted for as musicians, we'll say 2 billion people, right? So you don't necessarily have to approach it as I'm going to win over the world. If that happens, great. But you can look at your local area, like promoting yourself in your local area. Now, if you're a guy like me who lives in the middle of nowhere, uh, that doesn't really go very far. So I have to reach out further. I have to reach an audience in like neighboring cities and stuff like that. Which is about 60 miles away from me. So that's not easy either, because for me to just show up, you know, by myself is not gonna accomplish much. So getting musicians together is always very very difficult. Now, one thing you can do, and if you look at a lot of pro bands that tour the world and stuff like that, one thing you'll find is that they don't all live beside each other. One guy lives in Italy, the other guy lives in Germany, the other guy lives in Canada. Uh, you know what I mean? Like, and it's like they found a way to make it work. So that's another way of looking at it. Like, for example, something that I've just not been able to do because my not until I get a new laptop and better cameras and stuff like that. But you know, basically jamming on a stream. People have been doing that, but that has its costs and everything like that too. Like that's a totally different setup. And like for example, if you're looking at like the drum kit and the guitar here, this is kind of like real world setup, right? Um, and the amplifier in the background. This is kind of what you would use at a gig, right? Not necessarily what you're going to use on the internet, even though you might use the guitar and the drums or whatever. But people plugged into, making what you call it like a direct digital sounds in their videos, where they've got basically an audio interface almost directly into their camera or into a board or whatever. That's a complete different setup. But that setup gives you the flexibility of reaching the world without leaving your home, right? But what it doesn't do is it doesn't network necessarily for you. That you have to still do the old-fashioned way. You have to contact people. You have to, make things work. Now, I'm seeing some people do some unique things, like, for example, Bernth, Bernth, that guy's channel. How he went on tour. He's still a one-man band, but he has, like, for example, a sound engineer and I guess, his recording producer and whatever that comes with him. And he basically, for lack of a better term, is he's playing along to his own jam tracks, right? He just, it's kind of like karaoke for guitar, right? But he's found a way to make that one man band thing work, which for his side project, right? Now, mind you, he's also in another band that plays in big festivals in front of thousands and thousands of people. Lucky bugger, right? Um, so you got a bit of the new way of doing things and the old way of doing things, and both have potential for making you money, but at what cost? You know what I mean? Like anything, you have to approach music as a business if you want to make money with it. It does take money to spend money, but you have to know where to spend that money. And I think the periphery method, Mark Holcomb was talking about this, what they did in his other project, which I've never actually checked out any of his Haunted Shores stuff, but what he was saying is what they did was rather than worrying about making the money and whatever, just make the music they really, really like making it the best they can, and then putting it out there and building the fan base. And the fan base kind of takes care of all those other problems because at the end of the day, it's your fan base that consumes the music. Which brings me to my next kind of little point here: how we consume music. Back in the day, you had records, right? And that was the first recordings was records. And records were not super widely distributed when you think about it in hindsight. So one person might have a record and half the city block would come over and listen. When I was a kid in the 70s, that's how I discovered a lot of bands was, hey, come over to my place, listen to this. I discovered Jimi Hendrix that way. My mom was an Elvis fan, God rest her soul. So I heard her Elvis records from when she was a kid, Beatles, stuff like that.